Ma'am, this is an airport, not a place to invent emergencies. Officer Caleb Turner said it without looking at the security cameras, without asking what the bag looked like, without even turning toward the man Naomi Brooks had just pointed out. His voice cut through Terminal B at Hartsfield-Jackson like a cold announcement no one wanted to hear. Naomi stood beside the crowded check-in lanes with her boarding pass bent in one hand and her phone in the other, her breath held tight beneath the white airport lights. Around her, wheels clicked over polished floors, flight announcements echoed from the ceiling, and travelers moved in restless lines with coffee cups, backpacks, and sleepy children leaning against their legs. But Naomi was not watching the crowd. She was watching a white businessman in a gray coat pull her black carry-on toward the escalator, one hand wrapped around the handle like he had practiced the mistake before making it. Stay with this story, because in just a few minutes, the same officers who ignored this black woman would hear one call from Washington and realize she was not asking for help because she was confused. She was asking because people's lives depended on that bag. And if you believe stories about justice, dignity, and truth deserve to be heard, subscribe now, because what happens inside this airport will show why power means nothing when it refuses to listen. Naomi took one step around Officer Turner, but he shifted in front of her, broad-shouldered in his airport police uniform, his badge catching the fluorescent light. "Sir, that man has my bag," she said, keeping her voice controlled even as Victor Hale reached the escalator. "There is federal evidence inside. You need to stop the terminal exit and review the cameras now." Turner gave her the kind of look that did not search for facts. It searched for reasons to dismiss her. His eyes moved over her wrinkled tan coat, her worn sneakers, the loose curls pulled back after a sleepless flight from Chicago, and the exhaustion beneath her eyes. To him, she did not look like someone connected to Washington. She looked like a problem standing too close to a security lane. "People lose luggage every day," he said. "File a claim with the airline." Naomi's fingers tightened around her boarding pass. Beyond him, Victor stepped onto the escalator, the black carry-on rolling behind him. Inside that bag was an encrypted drive, signed witness statements, sealed photographs, and a list of names tied to a labor trafficking investigation crossing 3 states. Inside that bag was the reason a 17-year-old girl named Lena Ortiz had finally agreed to testify. Inside that bag was the difference between protection and disappearance for families who had already learned how easily the powerful could erase the poor. Naomi lowered her voice. "Officer, listen carefully. If that bag leaves this airport, people could be moved before sunrise." Turner's expression hardened, not because he understood the danger, but because he did not like the sound of a black woman telling him what needed to happen. A few travelers slowed nearby. A man in a navy suit glanced over his newspaper. A teenage girl pulled out her phone. Turner leaned closer, still calm enough to sound official. "You need to stop causing a scene." Naomi looked past his shoulder. Victor reached the lower level and turned toward the taxi signs. The distance between justice and failure had become one moving suitcase, one escalator, one officer too proud to ask a single question. Naomi lifted her chin, her voice quiet but steady. "I am not causing a scene," she said. "I am trying to prevent one." Naomi did not move for 1 second, because 1 second was all she could afford to spend understanding the shape of the insult before deciding what to do with it. Terminal B kept rushing around her, bright and loud and polished, but the space between her and Officer Caleb Turner felt suddenly narrow, as if the whole airport had tightened into a single line she was not being allowed to cross. Victor Hale had already disappeared down the escalator with her carry-on, and every click of luggage wheels on the floor sounded like time leaving her hands. She looked at Turner and forced her voice lower, not softer because she was afraid, but lower because panic would only give him the excuse he was already searching. 4. "My name is Dr. Naomi Brooks," she said. "I am a legal consultant attached to a protected federal evidence transfer. I need your supervisor, airport security camera access, and a temporary hold on the north taxi exit." Turner stared at her for a moment, then glanced at the bent boarding pass in her hand, as if credentials could not possibly belong to someone wearing worn sneakers and a coat wrinkled from a red-eye flight. "Doctor," he repeated, almost tasting the word for something false. Naomi had heard that tone before. She had heard it in hotel lobbies when clerks assumed she was waiting for someone else to check in. She had heard it in courthouse elevators when junior staff asked whether she was lost. She had heard it at policy meetings where men praised her memo before realizing she had written it. She had learned not to waste energy being surprised by disbelief. She spent that energy building proof. 12 years earlier, Naomi had been a public defender in Cook County, standing beside people whose names were mispronounced by judges and forgotten by systems. Then came human rights law, then federal advisory work, then the kind of cases that began with one frightened witness and ended in rooms where senators lowered their voices. None of that showed on her face now. What showed was a black woman alone in an airport, asking for help from a white officer who had already decided her urgency was attitude. Identification, Turner said. Naomi reached carefully into the inner pocket of her coat. Slowly, he added, loud enough for nearby travelers to hear. A few heads turned again. Naomi paused, then removed a slim leather credential wallet and held it out. Turner took it, opened it, and frowned. Not because it failed to identify her, but because it identified her too well. Department of Justice Consultant Badge. Federal Court Clearance. Emergency Contact Line. His thumb hovered over the embossed seal, and for one fragile moment, Naomi thought the facts might finally interrupt his pride. Then he closed the wallet and kept it in his hand instead of giving it back. This says consultant, he said. Not law enforcement. Naomi's jaw tightened. That is why I came to law enforcement. The answer landed cleanly, but Turner did not let it breathe. You expect me to shut down an airport exit because you misplaced a suitcase? It was taken. You saw someone take it? Yes. Then why did you let him? The question was quiet, but it carried the full weight of contempt. Naomi felt it strike somewhere old and familiar. She looked past him toward the escalators, where travelers were still descending toward baggage claim and ground transportation, unaware that a man carrying evidence against men with money was walking among them. In the carry-on was a hard drive encrypted by federal technicians in Chicago, 2 signed affidavits from workers held under threats of debt and deportation, and a sealed recording from Lena Ortiz, 17 years old, who had spoken for 43 minutes with her hands shaking beneath a conference table. Lena had not asked for revenge. She had asked whether her mother would still be safe if she told the truth. Naomi had promised her protection would begin in Washington. That promise now depended on a bag, a gate, and a man who mistook doubt for judgment. Officer Turner, Naomi said, I do not need you to believe I am important. I need you to believe the evidence is. His eyes hardened at being corrected. He slipped her credential wallet into his own hand beside his radio. Until I verify this, you are going to stay right here. Naomi looked at the escalator, then at the terminal signs glowing above the crowd. North Taxi Exit, 200 feet. Victor Hale had a head start, and the airport suddenly felt much larger than it had a minute ago. Officer Caleb Turner had spent 16 years inside airports, long enough to believe he could read people faster than the cameras above him. He trusted posture, clothing, tone, shoes, hesitation, the small details he thought separated honest travelers from trouble. A businessman in a tailored suit became "Sir" before he opened his mouth. A tired mother with a stroller became someone to guide gently toward the correct line. A black woman with a wrinkled coat, worn sneakers, and urgency in her voice became a problem to contain. He would never have called it prejudice. Men like Turner rarely did. They called it instinct. They called it experience. They called it keeping order. Naomi watched that instinct work against her in real time as he stood between her and the North Taxi exit, her credential wallet still in his hand, his shoulder radio close enough to save the day and silent enough to ruin it. Call your supervisor, she said. Turner did not answer right away. He looked over her shoulder at the travelers gathering in loose half circles, then back at her, measuring not the facts but the performance. I said I am verifying. You are delaying. You are escalating. No, Naomi said, each word held steady. The man with my bag is leaving. Turner's mouth tightened. You keep saying that, but all I have is your word. Naomi almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the entire country seemed built on deciding whose word became enough. Behind Turner, an older white couple watched with careful distance. A young man in a Falcons hoodie raised his phone, then lowered it when Naomi looked his way. Near the check-in kiosk, a black airport employee paused with a stack of baggage tags in her hand, her face caught between wanting to help and knowing what help could cost when a uniform had already chosen a side. Turner turned Naomi's credential wallet over again. Dr. Naomi Brooks, he read, slower than necessary. Legal consultant. Federal advisory clearance. He looked up. If this is so urgent, where is your security detail? Delayed in Chicago because weather grounded half the morning flights. Convenient. Naomi's fingers closed around nothing. She could feel the absence of her phone more sharply now. Turner had not taken it, but he had ordered her not to use it while he verified her story, and every second she obeyed was a second Victor Hale gained. She had the emergency line memorized. She had Senator Margaret Collins's office 2 taps away. But if she reached for the phone and Turner decided to restrain her for interference or disorderly conduct, the bag would be gone before anyone in Washington could say her name. That was the trap. Not only the airport. Not only the badge. The trap was being forced to choose between appearing calm enough to be believed and acting fast enough to prevent disaster. Officer Turner, she said, you are not just holding me here. You are holding up a federal hearing scheduled for 8 o'clock tonight. He gave a dry breath through his nose. Now it is a federal hearing. It has been a federal hearing since before I walked into this terminal. And yet nobody told airport police. Your dispatch was notified. Ask them. His eyes flicked toward his radio. That flicker was the first honest thing he had done. Naomi saw the possibility open and leaned into it. Ask them about a protected evidence transfer from Chicago to Washington. Ask them about the Department of Justice liaison assigned through Atlanta. Ask them about Senator Collins. The name changed the air by a fraction. Turner knew it. So did the airport employee near the kiosk. Senator Margaret Collins had been on the news all week, announcing hearings on forced labor networks hidden behind legitimate contracting firms. Turner looked down the terminal toward the escalators. For the first time, his certainty wavered. Then pride stepped back in, dressed as procedure. You are going to wait here until I confirm it my way. Naomi's eyes sharpened. Your way is letting him walk out. Turner moved closer, lowering his voice. And your way is making demands in the middle of my terminal. Naomi looked at him then, not with fear, not with anger loud enough to feed his story, but with a quiet disappointment that made him glance away. This terminal is not yours, she said. It belongs to every person you are supposed to protect. The words reached the airport employee first. Her grip tightened around the baggage tags. A man in line stopped pretending not to listen. Somewhere below them, an automatic door opened to the taxi lane. Naomi heard it in her mind more than in the terminal, the soft slide of glass, the sound of evidence crossing from public space into disappearance. Turner lifted his radio at last, but not to call the alert she needed. Dispatch, he said, still watching Naomi, I need verification on a female passenger claiming federal status at Terminal B. Naomi's heart sank. He had chosen doubt again. And beneath the white airport lights, Victor Hale moved 1 minute closer to freedom. Naomi saw the opening before Turner understood he had created one. His radio call had gone out, which meant someone above him now had a thread to pull, but it also meant Victor Hale still had the length of the terminal, the escalator, and the taxi doors to turn evidence into nothing more than a story she could no longer prove. She stepped toward the security counter, not fast enough to be called reckless, but with enough purpose that the airport employee holding the baggage tags looked up sharply. Please, Naomi said to her, voice low and direct. Terminal B lower-level camera, north taxi exit. Black carry-on, silver zipper, red identification ribbon, pulled by a man in a gray coat. The employee hesitated. Her name tag read Marisol. She glanced at Turner, then at Naomi's face, and something passed between the two women that did not need explaining. It was the silent recognition of people who knew how often help arrived late when you looked like the person asking. Turner moved in immediately. Step away from the counter. Naomi did not turn. Lock the camera feed. Do not erase anything. Do not let it roll over. Marisol's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Turner's voice sharpened. I said step away. The words hit the air hard enough to make a toddler in a nearby stroller go quiet. Naomi turned back slowly, her hands visible at her sides, her expression calm but no longer yielding. Officer, if that man reaches a vehicle, families under federal protection could be relocated by morning. Witnesses could vanish. A 17-year-old girl who trusted the justice system could be left with nothing but a promise I failed to keep. Turner stared at her, and for the first time, the certainty in his eyes had to work harder to stay alive. You keep making this bigger. Naomi took one step closer, keeping her voice even. No. You keep making me smaller so you do not have to hear it. The sentence changed the temperature around them. A few travelers stopped completely. The man in the navy suit folded his newspaper. Marisol lowered her hand from the keyboard, not away from helping, but away from fear. Naomi looked directly at Turner. Close the north taxi exit for 3 minutes. Review the camera. If I am wrong, I will answer every question you have. But if I am right, and you let him leave because you needed me to sound less urgent, then this will not be a lost bag. It will be a lost case. Turner's jaw flexed. His shoulder radio crackled with ordinary dispatch noise, not yet the answer that could save them. He still held her credential wallet. He still had the badge, the uniform, the authority to move people, to stop doors, to make the airport obey. And he still chose himself. You are not giving orders here, he said. People like you always make it sound like the world is ending. The words landed cleanly, and this time even Turner seemed to hear them after they left his mouth. Marisol's face tightened. The young man in the Falcon's hoodie lowered his phone all the way. Naomi did not flinch, but something in her eyes dimmed for half a breath, not from surprise, from recognition. There it was. Not procedure. Not caution. The thing underneath. She looked past him toward the escalator well, where the down escalator fed into the lower level like a river carrying her evidence away. People like me, she repeated softly. Turner's face shifted. You know what I mean. Yes, Naomi said. That is the problem. Silence spread around the security counter, thin but sharp. In that silence, Marisol turned to her screen and typed. Turner saw it too late. Do not access that feed. Marisol swallowed but kept her eyes on the monitor. Sir, she said carefully, there is a man with a black carry-on at the north taxi exit. Naomi's breath caught. The monitor's blue-white light reflected in Turner's eyes as he turned. Victor Hale appeared on the screen, gray coat, smooth stride, red ribbon on the handle of Naomi's bag. He was 30 feet from the sliding doors. Naomi moved toward the screen, heart beating hard but voice controlled. That is him. Turner looked at the image, then at Naomi, then at the passengers watching him watch the truth appear in real time. For 1 second, the right thing was close enough to touch. Then his pride made one final reach for control. That still does not prove what is inside the bag. Naomi's face went still. Then stop him and find out. The radio on his shoulder burst to life before he could answer, but it was not dispatch this time. The voice was sharper, higher ranking, and already alarmed. Turner, hold your position. We have incoming verification from Federal Command. Naomi looked toward the monitor. Victor Hale stepped through the sliding doors toward the taxi lane, and the glass closed behind him like the first sound of failure. The sliding doors closed behind Victor Hale, and Naomi felt the airport widen between them like a canyon. The monitor showed him entering the taxi lane, still calm, still polished, still carrying the black bag with the red ribbon as if it belonged to him, as if truth itself could be wheeled away under fluorescent lights and no one would stop it in time. Marisol froze behind the counter, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Officer Turner stood beside Naomi with her credential wallet still in his hand, caught between the image on the screen and the voice crackling from his radio. Turner, hold your position, the command repeated. Federal verification is coming through. Naomi's eyes stayed on the monitor. He is outside. Turner did not answer. The muscles in his jaw tightened, and Naomi could almost see the fight inside him, not between right and wrong, but between action and embarrassment. If he moved now, he would be admitting that he should have moved sooner. If he waited, he could still pretend caution was procedure. Down on the screen, Victor glanced once over his shoulder, then stepped toward the curb where a line of taxis waited beneath yellow signs and exhaust haze. Naomi reached for her phone. Turner's hand lifted slightly. Do not, he said. The word was quiet but hard. Naomi looked at him, and the polished noise of Terminal B seemed to fall away. The rolling suitcases, the boarding announcements, the coffee machines, the children asking tired questions near gate B12, all of it blurred into a white hum. She saw only the phone in her hand, the bag on the screen, and the memory of Lena Ortiz sitting under a flickering office light in Chicago, twisting a paper napkin until it tore into soft white strips. Lena had been 17, but fear had made her look younger. She had asked Naomi, "If I talk, will they know where my mother lives?" Naomi had answered carefully, legally, truthfully, but beneath every official word was a promise no document could hold: "I will not let them make you disappear." Now that promise was standing at a taxi curb with another man's hand on its handle. Naomi lowered her phone slowly, not because Turner had won, but because she needed one clean second to think. She looked through the glass wall beyond the security counter. Outside, planes moved like huge silver shadows across the wet runway, their lights blinking in the gray afternoon. Inside, the floor shone so brightly it reflected everyone's shoes but not their intentions. Her own hands were steady. That surprised her a little. Anger had a temperature, and hers had gone cold. "You have my identification," she said. "You have a camera image. You have federal command calling your name. What else do you need before you help me?" Turner swallowed. The question had no safe answer. Around them, the crowd had changed again. People were no longer watching a woman complain about luggage. They were watching an officer refuse the door while proof stood open in front of him. Marisol leaned closer to the monitor. "He is getting into a cab," she whispered. Naomi turned sharply. Victor had opened the rear door of a yellow taxi. The black carry-on stood beside his leg. One hand on the door. One hand on the handle. 30 seconds, maybe less. Turner finally raised his radio. "Dispatch, this is Turner. I need airport police at the north taxi exit for a baggage stop." Naomi's breath caught, but the order was too small, too late, too cautious. "Say federal evidence," she said. He hesitated. "Say it." His eyes flicked to hers. For the first time, he did not look offended by her instruction. He looked afraid of the truth inside it. "Possible federal evidence involved," he added into the radio. "Stop the cab before departure." On the monitor, Victor saw 2 airport officers moving through the taxi lane. His comm cracked just enough for Naomi to see it even through grainy video. He stepped back from the cab, looked toward the doors, and pulled out his phone. Naomi's blood went cold. "He is warning someone," she said. Turner looked at the screen. "How do you know?" Naomi did not take her eyes off Victor. "Because men like him always have someone waiting for the call." The radio burst again, this time louder, clearer, and carrying a voice that made Turner stand straighter. "Officer Turner, this is Deputy Chief Mallory. Stand down from further questioning of Dr. Brooks. She is confirmed through the Department of Justice. Federal agents are entering Terminal B now. Secure the north taxi exit immediately." The words hit the counter, the crowd, and Turner's face like a door swinging open to a room he had insisted was empty. Naomi did not smile. She did not say she had warned him. She only reached out her hand. "My credentials." Turner looked down as if he had forgotten he was still holding them. Slowly, he placed the wallet in her palm. His fingers did not touch hers. "Dr. Brooks," he began, but his apology had not yet earned the right to exist. Naomi stepped past him, eyes on the monitor, voice low and unshaken. "Apologies can wait. That bag cannot." Naomi moved before the silence could settle around Turner's mistake. She crossed the polished floor toward the escalators with her credential wallet back in her hand and the weight of every lost second pressing between her shoulder blades. Behind her, Marisol called out from the counter, "North taxi exit camera is still live." Turner followed 2 steps behind, not leading now, not blocking, only trying to catch up to the truth he had delayed. The airport seemed louder as they descended, wheels snapping over metal grooves, children asking for snacks, a boarding announcement for Washington echoing above them, the low mechanical hum of the escalator carrying them toward the lower level. Through the glass below, Naomi could see the taxi lane flashing in pieces between moving travelers. Yellow cabs. Silver doors. Wet pavement. Victor Hale standing near the curb with the black carry-on beside him, phone pressed to his ear, his polished face no longer smooth. Two airport officers approached from the far side, but slowly, careful not to panic the crowd. Naomi understood the caution. She also understood what it cost. "He is making the call," she said. Turner lifted his radio. "North taxi units, move closer." "No," Naomi said, sharp enough to stop him mid-step. "Do not crowd him unless the exit is sealed." Turner looked at her, this time without the old contempt. "What do you need?" The question was small, but it mattered. Naomi kept walking. "Block the vehicle lane. Quietly. No sirens. No shouting. He needs to believe he still has options until federal agents arrive." Turner repeated the instruction into his radio, word for word. The difference struck Naomi harder than she expected. Not because it fixed what happened upstairs, but because listening had finally become possible. They reached the bottom of the escalator as two federal agents entered from the secure corridor, dark suits moving with calm urgency through the airport noise. One of them, Agent Priya Shah, locked eyes with Naomi and nodded once. No drama. No surprise. Just recognition. "Dr. Brooks," she said, falling into step. "We have confirmation from Washington. Senator Collins is holding the hearing open for 30 minutes. Deputy Attorney General's office is on standby." Naomi's chest loosened by an inch, but her eyes stayed on Victor. "The bag has the drive and witness packets. If he sends a warning before we secure it, Lena Ortiz and the others may have to be moved tonight." Agent Shah's face hardened. "Then we do this clean." Outside the sliding doors, Victor ended his call and reached for the taxi handle again. The lane in front of him shifted almost invisibly. One airport vehicle paused at the curb, a baggage cart turned sideways near the exit, and a traffic officer stepped into position with a hand raised as if managing ordinary congestion. Victor looked up, irritated, not yet afraid. Naomi stopped inside the glass, close enough to see the red ribbon on the carry-on handle. For a moment, the white airport lights reflected over her face and blurred with the gray afternoon beyond. The doors. She thought again of Lena under that flickering office light, asking whether truth would make her family safer or more hunted. Naomi had no badge on her chest, no uniform, no loud symbol that forced people to listen. She had her work, her word, and now, finally, people willing to act on both. Agent Shah touched her earpiece. "Move." The sliding doors opened. The airport noise spilled outside with them. Victor turned at the sound of Naomi's voice. "Mr. Hale." His eyes found her, and the mask returned too quickly. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding," he said, one hand still on the bag. Naomi walked toward him with Turner and the federal agents behind her. "There has," she answered. "You misunderstood who was watching." Turner stood slightly to her right, no longer in front of her. That mattered too. Victor looked at the officers, the blocked lane, the agents, the carry-on, and for the first time his confidence had nowhere to sit. Agent Shah stepped forward and identified herself, calm and official. The bag was secured without chaos, without raised voices, without giving Victor the scene he might twist into confusion. When Naomi's hand closed around the carry-on handle, the red ribbon brushed her fingers like a pulse returning. She unzipped the outer pocket just enough to see the sealed evidence pouch still inside. The encrypted drive. The witness statements. Lena's recording. Still there. Still safe. The breath Naomi had been holding since Terminal B finally left her body. Turner saw it. He saw how little this had ever been about luggage, how much weight one plain black bag could carry when the person holding it had been telling the truth all along. "Dr. Brooks," he said quietly. Naomi looked at him, her face calm but unreadable. He lowered his eyes for half a second. "I should have listened." The taxi lane moved around them again, ordinary travelers stepping past with suitcases and coffee cups, unaware that a case had just been saved in the space between pride and humility. Naomi placed the evidence pouch back inside the bag and closed it carefully. "Yes," she said. "You should have." The taxi lane did not erupt into chaos. That was what made the moment feel so strange to Naomi. A man connected to a federal case stood beside a yellow cab with his polished mask slipping. The evidence was back in her hand, federal agents were quietly closing the circle, and still the airport around them kept breathing as if nothing sacred had nearly been lost. A family rolled 2 suitcases toward the curb. A business traveler complained into a phone about a delayed meeting. Rainwater glimmered in thin lines near the crosswalk. Victor Hale looked from Agent Shaw to Naomi, then to Turner, searching each face for a weak seam. "I picked up the wrong bag," he said smoothly. "That happens in airports every day." Naomi held the carry-on beside her leg, the red ribbon wrapped once around her fingers. "You removed the airline tag before you reached the taxi doors." Victor's eyes cooled. Agent Shaw glanced at the bag handle and then at him. "That will be addressed." Turner stood still, listening, and the listening seemed to cost him more than speaking ever had. His face had changed since Terminal B. Not redeemed, not yet, but stripped of the easy certainty he had worn like part of the uniform. Naomi noticed, but she did not soften for him. There was still work to do. Agent Shaw signaled to another federal agent, who guided Victor away from the cab without force or spectacle, only firm words and practiced authority. Victor kept his chin high, but his hand no longer moved toward his phone. The call he had placed would be traced. The contacts behind it would be warned too late. The chain would hold long enough for Washington to act. Naomi turned toward the glass doors, and for the first time since the bag vanished, she felt the full weight of exhaustion press against her body. Her flight to Washington was boarding soon. The hearing had been held open, but not forever. Senator Margaret Collins was waiting. The Deputy Attorney General's office was waiting. Lena Ortiz and every frightened worker whose name was sealed in that evidence pouch were waiting for proof to become protection. Turner cleared his throat behind her. "Dr. Brooks." Naomi stopped, but did not turn right away. The wet air smelled like jet fuel, pavement, and the bitter edge of airport coffee drifting from inside. "When you said people like you," she said quietly, "you said the part most people try to hide." Turner's eyes dropped. "I know." "Do you?" She turned then, and her voice stayed calm enough to be fair, but direct enough to leave no place for excuses. "Because the damage was not only that you doubted me. It was that you decided I had to become connected to someone powerful before I became worth helping." Turner absorbed the words with his jaw tight and his hat in one hand. The traffic officer nearby pretended not to listen, but he heard it. So did Marisol, who had come down from the counter and stood just inside the sliding doors, hands clasped in front of her vest. Turner looked at the carry-on, then at Naomi's face. "I was wrong from the first sentence." Naomi did not answer quickly. Forgiveness, she knew, was not a performance for bystanders. It was not owed because someone finally understood the shape of their mistake. But she also knew that truth, when spoken clearly, could become a door if the person hearing it had enough humility to walk through. "Then let the report say that," she said. "Not that I was upset. Not that there was confusion. Not that procedure took time. Say that I asked for help, and you refused to believe me until a powerful name made you listen." Turner nodded once, slowly. "I will." Naomi studied him for another breath, looking for the old defensiveness. It flickered at the edges, but it did not take over. That was not redemption. It was only the first honest step toward it. Agent Shaw approached with a sealed evidence transfer case, black, hard-sided, official. Naomi placed the carry-on on top of a luggage cart and watched as the contents were checked, logged, and secured in the case under 2 signatures. When Lena's recording was confirmed intact, Naomi closed her eyes briefly. In that darkness, she saw the girl's hands stop shaking. She saw a mother's address moved into protection. She saw men who had hidden behind contracts and clean offices finally facing questions under bright lights. When she opened her eyes, Marisol was looking at her with quiet pride. "You were right," Marisol said. Naomi gave her a tired smile. "You helped make sure it mattered." The words landed softly, and Marisol's shoulders loosened. Inside the terminal, the loudspeaker announced final boarding for the Washington flight. Naomi lifted the sealed case by its handle. Turner stepped aside before she had to ask. This time, he made space. Naomi walked back through the sliding doors with the sealed evidence case in her right hand and the black carry-on rolling quietly behind her, its red ribbon still tied to the handle like a small witness that had survived the afternoon. The airport did not stop for her. It never had. People kept boarding flights, buying coffee, checking screens, arguing about delays, and searching for charging outlets beneath rows of gray seats. But something in Terminal B had changed. The same travelers who had stared at her earlier now stepped aside without being asked. Some looked ashamed. Some looked curious. A few looked as though they wanted to apologize but did not know how to do it without making themselves the center of the wound. Naomi did not need their words. She needed the gate. Agent Shaw walked beside her, reviewing messages from Washington. Senator Collins is still holding the floor, she said. They are moving your testimony to the first slot. Once you land, a car will take you straight to the Capitol complex. Naomi nodded, eyes forward. And Lena? Agent Shaw's voice softened. Her family is being moved now. Protected housing. New route. New phones. They made it in time. The sentence reached Naomi slowly, like warmth returning to fingers after a long cold. She stopped near the entrance to the concourse for half a breath, and the noise around her blurred. Lena Ortiz would not have to sleep beside a packed bag wondering if truth had betrayed her. Her mother would not answer the door to strangers. The workers whose names were sealed inside the case would not be reduced to rumors and missing paperwork. The evidence had held. The promise had held. Behind Naomi, Turner approached with measured steps. He no longer carried her credentials, no longer stood in her path, no longer used the airport around him as an extension of his authority. His hat was in his hand. His face looked tired in the fluorescent light, not from running, but from finally carrying the weight of what he had done. "Dr. Brooks," he said. Naomi turned. Agent Shaw remained close, but said nothing. Turner looked at the sealed case, then at Naomi. "I filed the initial statement with Deputy Chief Mallory. I wrote that you identified yourself, that you requested immediate assistance, and that I failed to respond appropriately." His throat moved. "I also wrote the exact words I used." The terminal seemed quieter around them, though it was not. Naomi studied him. "That is a beginning." He nodded, accepting that she had not called it enough. "I know." For a moment, the men who had dismissed her in front of strangers looked like someone standing at the edge of a room he should have entered years ago. "I have been telling myself I treat everyone the same," he said. "But today I learned that saying that does not make it true." Naomi's expression did not soften into comfort. She would not rescue him from the discomfort that had finally become useful. "Then let discomfort teach you," she said. "Do not bury it under paperwork." Turner lowered his eyes. "I will not." A boarding agent announced final call for the Washington flight. Naomi adjusted her grip on the evidence case. Before she turned away, Turner spoke once more, quieter. "You should not have needed powerful connections to be believed." Naomi held his gaze. The words were late, but this time they were pointed in the right direction. "No," she said. "I should not have." Then she walked toward the gate. Near the row of windows, a little black girl with braids and a pink backpack watched her pass. The girl's mother was checking their boarding passes, unaware of the way her daughter's eyes followed Naomi, not because of the case, not because of the agents, but because Naomi moved through the airport with the calm of someone who had been doubted and still did not shrink. Naomi noticed the girl and gave a small nod. The girl straightened as if the gesture had handed her something invisible but real. At the gate door, Naomi paused and looked once through the glass wall toward the runway. Planes rolled beneath a gray evening sky, their lights blinking like promises moving through distance. She thought of Lena, of Marisol, of the people who had watched, of Turner standing behind her with his hat in his hands. Justice had not arrived cleanly. It had been delayed by pride, stained by assumption, and rescued by people who finally chose to listen. Naomi stepped onto the jet bridge with the sealed case at her side, carrying more than evidence to Washington. She carried a question that would outlive the flight, the hearing, and the apology behind her. How many people are ignored every day simply because no one thinks they look important enough to believe? The jet bridge hummed softly beneath Naomi's feet, a narrow tunnel of gray walls, cool air, and fluorescent light carrying her away from the airport floor where everything had almost fallen apart. Behind her, Terminal B continued its restless rhythm, but the noise grew distant with each step. Ahead, the aircraft door stood open, and beyond it waited Washington, the hearing, the sworn testimony, and the people whose names had been sealed inside the evidence case because truth was sometimes the only shelter they had left. Naomi paused just before boarding and looked down at the case in her hand. It was plain, black, heavy, and locked twice, but to her it felt alive. It carried Lena Ortiz's voice. It carried signatures from workers who had risked everything to speak. It carried photographs, dates, transactions, and the quiet courage of people who had been treated as invisible until their pain became impossible to ignore. A flight attendant greeted her gently, but Naomi's mind was still in the terminal, replaying the moment Officer Turner had stepped aside, the moment Marisol chose to help, the moment a little black girl with a pink backpack straightened after receiving nothing more than a nod. Sometimes dignity moved that way. Not as a speech. Not as applause. Just one person standing tall long enough for another person to believe they could stand tall too. Naomi took her seat near the window and placed the evidence case beneath her feet, close enough to feel its presence. Outside, the runway lights stretched into the evening like a path drawn across dark glass. Her phone vibrated once. A secure message from Agent Shaw appeared on the screen. Lena and her mother are safe. Transport complete. Naomi read it twice. Then she closed her eyes, and for the first time that day, her shoulders lowered. Not completely. People like her rarely got to lay the whole burden down. But enough. Back inside Terminal B, Officer Caleb Turner remained near the security counter long after Naomi's flight began boarding. His supervisor had taken his formal statement. The federal agents had moved on. Victor Hale was in custody. Travelers had returned to their lines. Yet Turner could not move as easily as the airport did. He stood beneath the same white lights where he had dismissed a woman asking for help and listened to the echo of his own words. People like you. He had spent years believing prejudice had to announce itself loudly to exist. Now he understood it could sound calm. Professional. Procedural. It could wear a badge, hold a radio, and call itself experience while refusing to see the person standing right in front of it. Marisol passed him on her way back to the counter. She did not speak at first. Then she stopped and said, "Next time, check the camera first." Turner looked at her, then nodded. "Next time, I listen first." The words did not fix anything. But they marked the place where fixing could begin. Hours later, in Washington, Naomi entered the hearing room still wearing the same wrinkled coat and worn sneakers that Turner had mistaken for unimportance. Senator Margaret Collins looked up as Naomi placed the sealed case on the table. The room quieted. Cameras adjusted. Lawyers leaned forward. Naomi opened the case, signed the transfer form, and watched Lena's recording become part of the official record. No one in that room knew the full weight of the airport floor, the blocked path, the delayed help, the humiliation swallowed so the mission could survive. But Naomi knew. And when the first question came, she answered clearly. Not for herself. For Lena. For her mother. For every person who had ever been ignored until someone powerful confirmed they mattered. By midnight, emergency protections were approved for the witnesses. Investigators moved on the network behind Victor Hale. Families were relocated. Phones were replaced. Doors that had been unsafe in the morning were locked and guarded by night. Naomi stood outside the hearing room afterward, looking through a tall window at the Capitol lights. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, steady, unpolished, unbroken. She thought of Turner's apology and knew that accountability was not the same as forgiveness. She thought of Marisol and knew that courage could begin with one hand reaching for a keyboard. She thought of the little girl in Terminal B and hoped the child remembered not the officer who blocked the way, but the woman who kept walking. The lesson was not that connections make a person worthy. The lesson was that no one should have to reveal connections to be treated as human. Power means nothing if it only listens upward. Justice begins when it listens to the person in front of it. And somewhere between a crowded airport, a sealed evidence case, and a flight into the dark, one question remained for everyone who had watched the story unfold: how many emergencies have we ignored because the person asking for help did not look important enough to believe?